let's go ahead and talk about these BOIs, or boards of inquiry. They're often known as what's called a show cause board. They typically apply to officers or warrant officers in the military, and we see these across all services, but most frequently we see these in the Army, although they're fairly common in the Air Force as well. And these BOIs, this officer show cause board, is typically when you have some type of derogatory information that's in your file which triggers it. In the Army, it's almost unilaterally a GOMOR, or General Officer Memorandum of Reprimand. So what happens is a service or an officer or a warrant officer has some type of allegation of misconduct that's dealt with at a GOMOR, which is the General Officer Memorandum of Reprimand, and that's permanently filed in their AMHR or their official file. Now, there's two ways that they can be required to show cause for retention. What a show cause board is simply that they need to show cause in front of a board in order to stay in the military, or they're getting kicked out. And one of two ways that can happen is once through the GOSCA, which is the General Officer Show Cause Authority, and that is the general officer or the convening authority who issued the GOMOR to you. That general officer has the ability to require you to show cause for retention. If it doesn't happen at that point in time, and that's almost immediate. So when a General Officer Show Cause Authority or the GOSCA requires you to show cause for retention, it happens not necessarily immediately, but very close in time to when the GOMOR is filed. So if you're an officer and you received a GOMOR and it was permanently filed, usually fairly shortly thereafter, it could be a matter of weeks or it could be a matter of months, you'll receive a requirement or a notice to show cause for retention. If it doesn't happen there, the next way you can be required to show cause for retention in the military is through HRC, and that's the Human Resources Command, or the equivalent that's for the Army, or the equivalent in the Navy, Marine Corps, or the Air Force. And what happens there is, as you're getting promoted or as your file's getting looked at for promotion, or sometimes HRC does what's called a sweep for a derogatory information. I don't know the specific name for it, but they look at files for derogatory information in the file, and they can require you to show cause for retention. So HRC or big Army or big Air Force can look at your file and say, oh, this officer has a General Officer Memorandum of Reprimand or some type of letter of reprimand in their file, and we want them to show cause for retention. And that may happen a year or even a year and a half down the road. I've seen a lot of cases where an officer has received a General Officer Memorandum of Reprimand. The Commanding General thought that was sufficient punishment, that they did not need to show cause for retention. Then maybe they're looked at for W3 or looked at for colonel or lieutenant colonel, whatever rank is next in line for them, or even some random look through their file, and a year and a half later, they're required to show cause for retention in the Army or in the military service. If you've been notified of an administrative separation board or a BOI, I want you to understand that you can absolutely fight this, regardless of whether your GOMOR was permanently filed or you're previously found guilty at NJP or Article 15. If you have a right to a board, get in front of these board members and fight. You can win these cases at a board. We do this routinely. If you want to have a conversation about how to do that, give me a call, 813-669-3500, or look at the information we have on our website, www.bileckilawgroup.com.